The response from the nation's capital. Henrietta Trey's Director of Economic Policy Research over at Veda Partners joins us now. Henrietta, fantastic to have you with us. Obviously, we saw a major escalation over the weekend with the U.S. directly striking Iran. How is this being received by D.C. Republicans? Is this a unifying moment for the party, or are we starting to see some fracture?
It's not 100% unified. I'd say it's about 85% unified, though, an 80-20 breakdown in terms of what we're seeing from Republicans on Capitol Hill. The issue is we're in sort of this interim period right now where no one wants a premature mission accomplished soundbite out there. That's going to be very difficult for members to maintain as we get into them coming back into session at noon today on the House side and this evening on the Senate side. So they have maybe 10 hours before, 5 hours before they start getting peppered with questions about where they stand on this. And it's going to be really important for the president to telegraph to members what's going on and what he plans to do. But right now they're in wait and see mode.
Henrietta, I was talking to Peter Cheer earlier in the hallway here from Academy Securities. He thinks it's likely that we've crossed the Rubicon at this point and that we cannot avoid long, drawn-out involvement in the Middle East militarily because of the end of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Do you hear others in Washington, D.C. Voicing the same concerns?
I do hear that concern. One of the things that I heard from a former State Department official who was there when they decided to go into Iraq is, anytime you smell roses in the Middle East, ask where the funeral is. Just really be careful about when you get optimistic that things are going really well. And I think that speaks to why members are being so reticent right now to make any declarative statements. I think there's a substantial muscle memory about just how bad this could get. Obviously, everybody hoping that it will not, but definitely thinking about the troops right now.
And of course, we are only 6 months into the Trump administration, but I do want to talk a little bit about midterms because this is something that has been making the rounds, particularly on social media over the weekend, that President Trump and Vice President Vance ran on the platform partly of being the peace party. And here we are directly involved in this conflict now. I mean, how do you think that this is going to be received by voters at these midterms?
It's really not the peace component that concerns me or concerns Republican leadership. The problem is that they made the argument to the American public that Trump would stop escalation of this. So if Trump was president, Putin would never have engaged in Ukraine. If Trump was president, then Hamas would never have invaded Israel. Now here we are, Trump is the president, and we are on the brink of full-scale war, if you wouldn't even call it that already, from dropping massive bombs on another nation in the Middle East. And the question is, was any of that true? And I think that's what's going to keep Republican leadership up at night, because that was what they sold to the American public. And now that we are in a position where there have been major bombs dropped and there is this very real risk of Iran becoming even more entrenched in its nuclear proliferation, as perhaps you were discussing, Matt, that's the real risk going forward. So it's a wholesale reassessment of what it is that they sold to the American public.
How seriously is the constitutionality of this being discussed? I saw Massey posted that this is not constitutional, and I guess it depends on your definition of war. Does it matter beyond, op-ed columns, Henrietta? Is there any chance that this becomes an issue for the president?
No, as a process argument, they'll have votes on it and that will go on your scorecard, and we'll think about that having repercussions 10, 20 years down the road as members run for office, famously thinking of Hillary Clinton and then Donald Trump himself saying, I would never have voted for that. These things have ripple effects down the line, but not immediately. There's nothing Congress can or will do to limit the president's authority on this. A vote in the Senate is being teed up. I understand Leader Schumer is going to file a war powers resolution to have a vote potentially before the reconciliation bill gets discussed. And then on the House side, Democrats are expecting something in the range of about 190 members to support, along with Massey and some very few Republicans.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask about before we let you go, Henrietta, the fact that you think about this tax bill. President Trump has the goal of passing it by July 4th. That is next Friday. Senate Republicans plan to begin voting on the bill midweek. Now that we do have this escalation and all these open questions, how does that factor into that voting process, if at all?
Right now, we're about 24 hours behind where we were on Friday. So Iran and the parliamentarian going through the process with Senate committees of jurisdiction, which sounds trite in comparison, but it's a very big deal, have all been delayed by about 24 hours. So today, the Senate Finance Committee is going to begin negotiating their package with the parliamentarian on the healthcare side. Tomorrow, they'll pivot to the tax portions. We're going to need to get a whole new score of this bill. They're going to have to rewrite substantial portions of it. Right now, they're down about $200 billion in revenue from where they were on Friday, based off of the bird bath, as we call it in the Senate. So the earliest I see the Senate voting on this package is slipped from Wednesday now to Thursday, realistically. So the timing is really tight to get this to the president. I have 40% odds that it could get to the president by the 4th of July. There's no shame in the game of waiting until July, but this is a very unpopular bill. It's got a 71% disapproval rating amongst independent voters. And to your point about the midterms, that's what's going to keep members up at night.
Oof. Well, Henrietta, it's fantastic to speak with you. Really appreciate your time on this Monday morning. That is Henrietta Treyz of Veda Partners. Meanwhile, let's get a check on these markets right now at the index level. You can see the S&P 500. It's not down. It's up slightly. We were lower by about 1% in the overnight session, coming back now about 20 minutes until the opening bell. Crude, a similar story to the other side. You had crude prices higher overnight over the past weekend, now coming in a little bit. And that bond rally really building some steam here. The 10-year Treasury yield now down about 3 basis points, Matt Miller.
Yeah.